The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculate lawns of Sunnyside Estates as Karen Whitfield completed her daily inspection of the neighborhood. At 52, Karen wore her position as Homeowner president like a badge of honor, treating the role with the gravity of a small-town mayor. Her highlighted bob haircut remained perfectly in place despite the gentle spring breeze. Much like the neighborhood, she devoted herself to maintaining in pristine condition. Karen had just finished documenting a violation at the Hendersons' house. Their trash bins had remained visible from the street a full 18 hours after collection when she spotted him. A young man in a dark hoodie, walking slowly down Magnolia Avenue, stopping every few yards to look around. Karen narrowed her eyes. She prided herself on knowing every resident of Sunnyside Estates, and this young man certainly wasn't one of them. The stranger paused beneath one of the neighborhood's prized cherry trees, now in full bloom. Instead of continuing on his way, he pulled out a professional-looking camera and began adjusting settings, positioning himself to capture the cascade of pink blossoms against the darkening sky. Karen felt her pulse quicken. In her mind, this wasn't innocent photography, it was reconnaissance. "Excuse me," Karen called out, striding purposefully toward him, clutching her HOA binder to her chest like armor. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The young man lowered his camera and turned toward her. Marcus Johnson was 22, a junior at the local university with warm brown eyes that now registered surprise at Karen's confrontational tone. He'd chosen this neighborhood specifically for its beautiful landscaping and spring blooms, never imagining his presence would cause alarm. "Just taking some photos of these trees," Marcus replied with a polite smile, gesturing to the cherry blossoms above. "They're perfect right now." Karen didn't return the smile. She looked pointedly at his camera, then back at his face. "This is a private neighborhood. Do you live here?" "No, ma'am," Marcus answered truthfully. "I live about 3 blocks over on Elmwood. I'm a photography student at State, and I'm working on a series about urban nature for my final portfolio." Karen's posture stiffened further. In her mind, his story seemed rehearsed, suspicious. "I know every street in this area, and I've never seen you before. Can I see some ID?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably, the evening suddenly feeling cooler. "I don't think I need to show ID to take pictures of trees from a public sidewalk." "This isn't a public sidewalk. This is Sunnyside Estates' private property," Karen insisted, though this wasn't entirely accurate. The sidewalks in the neighborhood were, in fact, public easements. "I'm really just taking photos for my class," Marcus explained, his voice remaining calm despite his growing discomfort. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a student ID. "See, I'm a student at State, photography major." Karen barely glanced at the ID. "Anyone could have a student ID. What's your address? Who are your parents? Why this neighborhood specifically?" With each question, her voice rose slightly, carrying across the quiet street. Across the way, Priya Patel, who had just arrived home from her hospital shift, paused while collecting her mail. Something about the interaction caught her attention, and she discreetly activated her doorbell camera's recording function. "I'm sorry if I've caused any concern," Marcus said, beginning to pack up his camera. "I can go somewhere else." "No, you stay right there," Karen replied, taking a step back and pulling out her phone. "I'm going to call someone who can verify who you are and what you're really doing here." Marcus felt a familiar sinking feeling in his stomach as Karen retreated to her porch, phone in hand, eyes never leaving him. This wasn't the first time his presence had been questioned in a neighborhood where he didn't belong, but he hadn't expected it while simply photographing flowers. As Karen dialed 911, her fingers trembling slightly with adrenaline, she was certain she was protecting her community from a potential threat. She had no idea she was about to set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. Karen retreated to her perfectly maintained porch, hand trembling slightly as she held her phone. She positioned herself to keep Marcus in her line of sight, convinced that if she looked away even for a moment, he might do something dangerous. From her vantage point, she could see him still standing by the cherry tree, now awkwardly shifting his weight from one foot to another, his camera hanging unused around his neck. 911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. "Yes, hello," Karen said, her voice pitched higher than normal. "My name is Karen Whitfield. I'm the president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association, and there is a suspicious man taking pictures of houses in our neighborhood." There was a brief pause on the line. "Is this person threatening you or anyone else, ma'am?" "Well, not explicitly," Karen admitted, "but he's clearly casing our homes. He's wearing a hoodie and taking photos. He claims he's a student, but I've never seen him around here before." The dispatcher's tone remained measured. "Ma'am, is he on private property or is he on the sidewalk?" Karen hesitated. "He's on the sidewalk, but this is a nice neighborhood. You don't get many strangers here, and he's being very defensive." "Defensive in what way?" the dispatcher asked. "He refused to show me proper identification when I questioned him. Karen said, her indignation building as she recalled their interaction. And he got very evasive when I asked what he was really doing here. Across the street, Priya Patel had stepped onto her own porch, pretending to arrange some potted plants while keeping her doorbell camera angled toward the scene. As a first-generation Indian American who had dealt with her own share of neighborhood suspicion when her family first moved in, something about the interaction disturbed her deeply. "Ma'am, did this person explicitly refuse to leave the area when asked?" The dispatcher inquired, typing notes as they spoke. "No, but that's not the point," Karen insisted, her voice rising. "He doesn't belong here, and I have a responsibility to protect our community. He's young, maybe early 20s, wearing a dark hoodie, and he has expensive camera equipment. What legitimate reason could someone like that have to be in our neighborhood taking pictures?" The dispatcher maintained her professional tone, though there was a subtle shift in her approach. "What do you mean by someone like that, ma'am?" Karen felt a flash of annoyance at being questioned. "I mean someone who doesn't live here, someone unfamiliar." She watched as Marcus took out his phone, perhaps calling for backup, she thought. "He's making a call now. Please send officers immediately. He might be dangerous." "Is he displaying any weapons or threatening behavior, ma'am?" "No. But you never can tell these days," Karen replied, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "He's African-American, wearing a dark hoodie. I just don't feel safe." The dispatcher was silent for a moment. "We'll send a patrol car to investigate, but please remain in your home and do not approach this individual again." "Can I have the exact address?" Karen provided her address, watching as Marcus appeared to be texting someone, completely unaware of the machinery she had just set in motion against him. "How soon will they be here?" "It looks like he's sending messages to someone." "Officers will be there shortly, ma'am. Again, please stay inside your home for your safety." "I can't do that," Karen replied, straightening her cardigan. "As HOA president, it's my duty to keep watch until they arrive." As she ended the call, Karen noticed several neighbors had begun to peer out their windows, curious about the unfolding situation. Good, she thought. More witnesses. She remained on her porch, arms crossed, maintaining what she considered a protective vigil over her threatened community. Across the street, Priya had heard enough. She pressed the button to save the video recording and then, after a moment's hesitation, began to upload it to her social media accounts. "This is what Black photography students have to deal with in our welcoming community," she typed, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Happening right now on my street." Neither Karen nor Marcus realized that within hours their interaction would no longer belong to just them, but to millions of strangers across the internet who would dissect every word, expression, and implication of what was unfolding on this quiet suburban street. Red and blue lights silently pulsed against the facades of Sunnyside Estates homes as a patrol car rolled to a stop near the cherry tree. The neighborhood had fallen into an uneasy quiet, with residents peering from behind curtains and blinds. Marcus Johnson remained where he stood, his photography equipment now packed away, his expression a careful mask that concealed the familiar mix of frustration and resignation he felt. Officer James Rodriguez stepped out of the driver's side, quickly assessing the scene before him. At 36, the 10-year veteran had responded to countless calls like this one, situations where a suspicious person often translated to someone who doesn't fit the neighborhood profile. His partner, Officer Tanya Williams, exited the passenger side, her notebook already in hand. "I'll speak with the young man," Rodriguez said quietly. "You take the complainant." Williams nodded, heading toward Karen, who was already marching down her porch steps with an air of vindication. Rodriguez approached Marcus, noting his university hoodie and the professional camera equipment partially visible in his bag. "Evening, sir," Rodriguez said, keeping his tone conversational rather than confrontational. "Mind if I ask what brings you to the neighborhood tonight?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm a photography student at State. I was just taking pictures of the cherry blossoms for my final portfolio project." He slowly reached for his wallet. "I have my student ID and driver's license if you need to see them." Rodriguez noticed the deliberate movements, the kind people made when they'd learned the hard way that sudden motions around police could be misinterpreted. "I appreciate that. May I see them?" Across the street, Officer Williams was getting a very different version of events. "He was taking pictures of our homes," Karen insisted, her voice carrying in the evening air. "I've never seen him before, and when I questioned him, he got defensive. In this day and age, you can't be too careful. So he was on the public sidewalk taking photographs?" Williams clarified, jotting notes. "Yes, but of our homes," Karen emphasized. "Don't people case houses that way? Take pictures to plan break-ins?" Williams kept her expression neutral. "Did he enter any private property or attempt to photograph through any windows?" "Well, no, but..." "And when you approached him, what exactly did he say?" Meanwhile, Rodriguez had verified Marcus' identity and was scrolling through some of the photographs Marcus had voluntarily shown him on his camera's display screen. artistic shots of cherry blossoms against the sunset, a series capturing light patterns through tree branches, nothing remotely concerning. "These are really good," Rodriguez commented genuinely. "You've got a good eye." "Thanks," Marcus replied, some tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm focusing on urban nature, how beauty persists in spaces where you might not expect it." Rodriguez nodded, then looked up to see Priya Patel approaching cautiously from her house across the street. "Officers," she called, "I have relevant information. I recorded part of the interaction before you arrived." Karen's head had snapped toward Priya. "You were recording me? That's an invasion of privacy." "It's my doorbell camera," Priya replied calmly. "It's aimed at public space from my property, which is perfectly legal." She turned to Officer Williams. "I'd be happy to share the footage if it would help clarify what happened." Officer Rodriguez rejoined his partner, speaking in a low voice. "Sir checks out completely. Student ID matches his driver's license. He lives 3 blocks over. He's got nothing but nature photos on his camera, and from what I can see, he never left the public sidewalk." Williams nodded, then addressed Karen directly. "Ms. Whitfield, it appears there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Johnson is indeed a photography student working on a project. He has every legal right to take photographs from a public sidewalk." Karen's face flushed. "But he was suspicious. You weren't here. You didn't see how he was acting." "Actually," Priya interjected, holding up her phone, "I have video of the entire interaction before you called 911. Karen's expression shifted from righteous indignation to uncertainty as she realized her version of events might be contradicted by recorded evidence. Several neighbors had now emerged from their homes, the scene drawing more attention than the quiet neighborhood had seen in months. "Mr. Johnson," Officer Rodriguez said, turning back to Marcus, "you're free to go. I apologize for the inconvenience." As Marcus gathered his belongings, Rodriguez handed him a business card. "If you need." Priya Patel sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone in disbelief. It was just past midnight, less than 4 hours since she'd uploaded the video of Karen confronting Marcus, and the numbers were already staggering. 50,000 views, 8,000 shares, comments pouring in by the second. "You need to see this," she told her husband, Raj, who was brewing chamomile tea to help them wind down. "It's gone completely viral." Raj leaned over her shoulder, adjusting his glasses. "Wow, did you expect this kind of reaction?" "No," Priya admitted. "I thought maybe some local friends would see it. I just wanted people to know what happened." She scrolled through the comments, a mix of outrage, personal stories of similar experiences, and calls for Karen to be identified. Across town, Marcus Johnson was experiencing his own version of viral fame. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with notifications since he'd arrived home. Friends, classmates, and complete strangers were tagging him in Priya's video, which had now been reposted on multiple platforms. "You woke?" his roommate asked, watching Marcus stare at his phone with a stunned expression. "I think so," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure. The support was overwhelming, but there was something unsettling about having a personal moment of discomfort transform into public entertainment. "I just wanted to take some pictures." Meanwhile, in her tastefully decorated bedroom, Karen Whitfield slept soundly, blissfully unaware that her face was being spread across the internet with captions like "Sunnyside Karen strikes again" and "Hey Joel, Karen calls cops on black photographer." Her social media accounts, rarely used except to post HOA announcements and photos of her prized roses, sat quiet and undisturbed for now. By 6 a.m., when Karen's alarm chimed, the video had reached over 1 million views. Local news stations had picked it up, and a producer from WKRN had already left 3 messages on Priya's voicemail requesting an interview. Twitter had given the incident its own hashtag, #CherryBlossomKaren. Karen followed her usual morning routine, stretching exercises, coffee with exactly 1 tablespoon of cream, a quick check of her email. There were several new messages in her inbox, which was unusual, but she decided they could wait until after breakfast. She turned on the local morning news while buttering her toast. Our top story this morning announced the anchorwoman, a viral video showing a confrontation in the Sunnyside Estates neighborhood has sparked outrage online. Karen froze, toast halfway to her mouth as her own face appeared on screen. A still image from the video, her expression stern as she confronted Marcus. The video, which has now been viewed over 1 million times, shows a woman identified by neighbors as the president of the local HOA, confronting a young black photography student and subsequently calling police. The toast dropped from Karen's fingers onto her plate. This couldn't be happening. Her phone began to ring, her sister calling from Tampa. She ignored it, instead grabbing her laptop to search her own name. The results made her stomach drop. At the local university's campus coffee shop, Marcus found himself surrounded by supportive classmates and professors from the photography department. His phone continued to buzz with notifications. "Marcus, have you seen this?" A classmate showed him her phone. The local news website had posted the story with the headline, "Racial Profiling or Neighborhood Watch, Viral Video Divides Community." "They're calling you a hero for staying so calm," another friend said. Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I was just trying to take pictures of some trees." Across town, Priya was on the phone with a representative from a national news network. "Yes, I recorded it because I've seen this kind of thing happen before," she explained. "No, I didn't expect it to get this much attention." By noon, internet sleuths had identified Karen's full name, her workplace at Sunnyside Realty, and her position as homeowner president. They'd found her rarely used Facebook page and Twitter account. They'd even discovered her professional profile on her company's website, which was now being flooded with negative comments. The machinery of internet justice was fully operational, and Karen Whitfield was about to experience its full force. By late afternoon, Karen Whitfield sat alone in her living room, curtains drawn against the two news vans parked across the street. Her phone had been ringing nonstop until she finally silenced it, watching with growing horror as messages poured in, some from friends expressing concern, others from strangers whose vicious words made her hands shake. Her email inbox had reached capacity, most messages bearing subject lines she couldn't bring herself to open. "This isn't fair," she whispered to the empty room. "I was trying to protect my neighborhood." Her doorbell rang, causing her to flinch. Through the peephole, she recognized Janet Morrison, the HOA vice president and someone she considered a friend for nearly a decade. Karen hesitated before opening the door just enough to see Janet's tense expression. "The board called an emergency meeting this morning," Janet said without preamble. "I tried calling you." Karen swallowed hard. "My phone's been overwhelming." "I can imagine," Janet replied, though her tone suggested little sympathy. "Karen, the board voted unanimously. We're asking you to step down as president, effective immediately." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. "You can't do that. I've been president for 6 years. I've done everything for this neighborhood." "That's just it," Janet said, her voice lowering. "This isn't just about yesterday. There have been complaints, other incidents. The Rodriguezes when they first moved in, the Chang family's Lunar New Year decorations, the Miller's son and his friends. This video just brought everything to the surface." Karen stared at her in disbelief. "Those were all legitimate covenant violations. I was doing my job." Janet's expression hardened. "The meeting minutes and my notes are in this envelope. Your key card to the community center needs to be returned by Friday." She handed over a manila envelope. "I'm sorry it's ending this way, Karen. I really am." As Janet walked away, Karen's phone chimed with an email notification from Sunnyside Realty, the company where she worked as an agent for the past 12 years. The subject line read, "Regarding your employment status, urgent." Across town, Marcus Johnson was meeting with the dean of his department, a supportive woman who had reached out immediately after seeing the video. "This is completely unacceptable. What happened to you?" Dean Rivers said, her indignation evident. "But something positive has come from it. The Harriman Foundation saw your work through all this media attention. They're offering you their annual scholarship for emerging photographers." Marcus sat back in his chair, stunned. The Harriman Scholarship was prestigious, $25,000 and a mentorship with one of the country's top photographers. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dean Rivers smiled. "Your work deserves recognition, regardless of how it came to their attention." Meanwhile, at Priya's house, she was declining yet another interview request when a text from a neighbor alerted her to new developments. "Karen's been put on leave at work." Jason at Sunnyside Realty confirmed it. Priya felt a complicated mix of emotions. She hadn't posted the video to destroy someone's life, only to document an injustice. Yet she couldn't deny feeling that consequences were appropriate. She thought about texting Marcus to check on him but hesitated, unsure if he wanted more attention or connection to the situation. That evening, Karen sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine, reading the formal letter from her employer. "Administrative leave pending investigation. Public statements inconsistent with our company values. Review of past client complaints." The words blurred as tears finally came. Her sister had been calling repeatedly from Tampa, and Karen finally answered. "You need to get off social media," her sister advised immediately, "and maybe come stay with me for a while until this blows over." "I can't just leave," Karen protested weakly. "This is my home." "Karen, someone posted your address online. This isn't just about embarrassment anymore. I'm worried about your safety." Karen looked around at her immaculate house, the home she'd been so proud of in the neighborhood she fought so hard to protect. For the first time, she wondered if she'd be able to continue living here at all. In the artificial glow of her laptop screen, she typed her own name into a search engine and immediately regretted it. The results were overwhelming. Karen Whitfield, racial profiling. Hanoi president harassment. White woman calls police on black student. Page after page of stories about her, none of them the stories she thought she'd been living. The early morning quiet of the police station was broken only by the gentle hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional ping of an incoming email. Officer James Rodriguez sipped his coffee as he completed paperwork from the previous day's shift. His browser tab was open to a local news article about the Cherry Blossom Karen incident, which continued to dominate headlines nearly a week later. Rodriguez scrolled through the comments, shaking his head at their vitriol. 20 years on the force had taught him that these situations were rarely as simple as they appeared in viral videos. He clicked over to the department's community outreach folder and opened a document he'd been working on for months, a proposal for a new reconciliation program designed to bring together people involved in nonviolent community conflicts. His surgeon had been skeptical, but had finally approved a pilot program just last week. Now, Rodriguez wondered if the Whitfield-Johnson incident might be an appropriate test case. He pulled out his notebook and found Marcus Johnson's contact information. Across town, Marcus was sorting through emails in the university's photography lab. The past week had been surreal: interview requests, messages of support, and even a few galleries interested in his work. The Harriman Foundation scholarship had been officially confirmed, and his advisor had suggested he consider expanding his Cherry Blossom series into something more conceptual. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, he might have let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Hello, Mr. Johnson. This is Officer Rodriguez from last week." Marcus tensed slightly. "Yes, I remember. I'm calling to ask if you'd be willing to participate in something we're developing, a community reconciliation program. It would involve meeting with Ms. Whitfield in a controlled environment." Marcus's immediate instinct was to refuse. "I'm not sure what that would accomplish, officer. I've moved on." "I understand," Rodriguez replied, "and you're under no obligation. But I've been reviewing your photography portfolio online, impressive work, by the way, and I noticed your project seems to focus on seeing the same spaces from different perspectives." Marcus was surprised. "You looked up my work." "I did. Your artist's statement mentioned using photography to bridge divides in perception. That's essentially what our program aims to do, but through conversation rather than images." The connection wasn't lost on Marcus. Still, he hesitated. "Why would Ms. Whitfield agree to this?" "She hasn't yet," Rodriguez admitted. "I wanted to speak with you first, but from what I've gathered, she's lost her job, her position in the community, and is receiving threats. People can be surprisingly receptive to new perspectives when their old world has collapsed." Meanwhile, Karen sat in her sister's Tampa guest room, staring at the ceiling fan as it made slow revolutions above her. She'd fled Sunnyside 3 days ago after someone had thrown eggs at her front door and left a crude sign on her lawn. Her termination from Sunnyside Realty had been made official yesterday, regrettable but necessary given the circumstances, according to the HR director's carefully worded email. Her phone rang with a local number she didn't recognize. Normally, she would have ignored it, but human contact, any contact that wasn't hateful, seemed precious now. "Mrs. Whitfield, this is Officer James Rodriguez from the Metro Police Department." Karen sat up straight. "Has something happened to my house?" "No, nothing like that. I'm calling about a new program we're initiating focused on community reconciliation. I was wondering if you would be willing to participate in a moderated conversation with Marcus Johnson." Karen felt lightheaded at the mention of his name. "The photographer? Why would he want to talk to me? And why would I agree to that?" "So more people can film me and put it online." "This would be a private meeting at the station," Rodriguez explained. "No recording devices, no audience. Just you, Mr. Johnson, and myself as a moderator." "What's the point?" Karen asked, her voice brittle. "Sometimes understanding another person's perspective can be healing for both parties," Rodriguez said. "I've spoken with Mr. Johnson, and while he's hesitant, he's considering it." Karen was silent for a long moment. He agreed. "After what I did?" "He's considering it," Rodriguez corrected, "as I'm hoping you will." Karen thought about her empty house, her former friends who now avoided her calls, her uncertain future. What would I have to do? Just talk, and more importantly, listen. Karen watched the ceiling fan make another full rotation. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I'm asking," Rodriguez replied, a note of genuine hope in his voice.